I am Quentin Collins, Assistant Director and alum of LaSalle University's Solstice Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program. Welcome to the last in a series of 7 evening readings taking place here in Auburndale, Massachusetts as part of our winter 2025 10-day residency start of our spring semester. So before I get into the order, I just want one more big round of applause for everyone who's read so far in the series. It's been awesome. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the folks who've been tuning in on the live stream. And we're going to bring it home, and we're going to bring it home big. So for tonight's reading, first up, we will have our faculty at large, Amy Hoffman, who will be introduced by faculty member David Yu. And then we will conclude with faculty member Ethan Gilsdorf doing his first official Solstice faculty reading, who will be introduced by grad assistant and alum Cassie Rubico. David, come on up to the mic.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me? Among many other things, Amy Hoffman is a writer, teacher, editor, activist, and for a very long time, she was a fellow faculty member here in the Solstice program. First time I heard Amy read, I immediately felt a connection with her, given we both write from an autobiographical base. The first books of hers that I'd read were memoirs, lies about my family, and hospital time. When you read Amy's work, you gain an education in writing, how to manage an ensemble cast, how to craft realistic yet concise dialogue, how to write honestly, how to write with humor, how to write with heart. I remember the first time I'd read Lies About My Family. Right from the start, it felt like she was writing about me. The hyper self-conscious way Amy reacts to meeting her first niece is precisely how I would react in that situation. I've been on the faculty at Solstice for 15 years at this point, and I've of course enjoyed working with all of my colleagues, but I've always felt a special connection with Amy, not only because of her voice on the page, but because we're both day teachers, which means we don't stay in the dorms and instead drive to work. It always made me feel like a real adult when I'd write about the commute with her during lunch. Then at the end of the workday, I'd go home, and the moment I stepped into the house, I'd try whining about the traffic to my wife, who spends a minimum of 15 hours a week year-round driving to her job in Boston. And she'd make this sound, ugh, and walk away from me, muttering to herself, he commutes to work for 4 days, once every 6 months. Amy and I would talk about more than just our commutes when we'd hang out. And what I've always appreciated about Amy is how warm and kind and honest she is. Before I met her, I'd always assumed I was the most humble, self-deprecating person on the planet. Turned out I was wrong, a rarity. Amy is disarmingly frank about her life and her work in a way that reassures me because I'm the same way, and it refuels my writing soul whenever I spend time with her. I often wonder if/fear my leaning toward autobiographically based fiction is due to a lack of imagination, but then I'll read realistic novels that stagger me and I feel reaffirmed in what I'm trying to write. I had that experience a few years back when reading Amy's first novel, The Off-Season. It's set in Provincetown during winter, and I especially enjoyed seeing the curtain pulled back because I visit P-Town annually with my family. Every August, we borrow my in-laws' RV and we camp in North Truro for a week. We only have our bikes, and midway during the trip, the kids abruptly tire of eating only Franks and beans, so we take the shuttle into Provincetown for a decent meal. On the bus drive in, there's a point where we pass dozens of one-room cottages that face the ocean. And even though I know Amy never lived in one, I always for a moment kind of picture her typing away at a rickety little desk inside one with her violin in the corner. It always makes me feel that same comforting energy I feel when I get to chat with her in person. It's a gift to know Amy and always a treat to get to hear her read her work. And I'm honored to introduce her. So please welcome my friend, Amy Hoffman.
Running away, so I can't even thank him for that. That was one of the most amazing introductions I've ever had. Thank you, David. I wanted to share with you a project I've been working on for the last year and a half or so. I've been co-editing a collection of writings by the late LGBTQ activist Urvashi Vad, together with Urvashi's sister Jyotsna Vad. The book is forthcoming from Duke University Press in April. If you've never heard of Urvashi, and many people, both queer and straight, have been inspired by her, this is what Rachel Maddow said about her and her book. America's most talented and articulate exponent of LGBTQ plus rights and liberation during the most consequential period for that movement in our nation's history. We all live today in a world that Urvashi shaped profoundly. She ought to be a household name. Urvashi's accomplishments are too numerous to mention, but some of the most well-known are her leadership of the National LGBTQ Task Force, her work for the Ford Foundation, her founding of roundtables of national activists on prison reform and religion, her leadership of the Arcus Foundation, and her love of informal discussion groups and potluck dinners. Rachel Maddow is correct in calling Urvashi an exponent of both LGBTQ plus rights and liberation. She came out of that segment of the movement that had an expansive definition of quote unquote gay rights, which recognized the necessity of transforming the structures of our society to benefit people of color, women, poor people, disabled people, youth, elders, and all others who are marginalized and oppressed under our current system. We need more than marriage, as you can see in the sign that she's holding on her book cover. And I don't know if you can read it, but it says on top, the Dyke Agenda. And Irv's concept of the Dyke Agenda has marriage equality checked off, but she also adds jobs for all, end violence against women and trans people, racial justice, immigrant rights. She herself was an immigrant and came to the US from India when she was 8. Reproductive justice and corporate welfare, and progressive leadership nationally and globally. Anything less, Urvashi believed, was only quote unquote virtual equality, the title of her book about the movement of the 80s and 90s, its successes and its flaws. Urvashi and I were partners for a couple of years in the early 1980s, and we remained close friends after that until her death in 2022 of breast cancer. I wrote a tribute to her for a memorial event in Boston in 2022. Because the event was about her quote unquote Boston years when she was in law school, I focused on her activities as a young woman in her 20s. She was a person of remarkable energy, intelligence, and humor, and I miss her every day. And I'll read the tribute that I wrote. Richard Burns, who became my mentor and best friend when we were both worked at Gay Community News in the late 1970s, introduced me to Urvashi. He had just left the paper to go to law school at Northeastern University, where he met Irv on his first day there. She was sitting in the student lounge, ostentatiously reading a copy of GCN, hoping to attract a few other LGBTQ folk. So she's like this, you know. And the tactic worked, and she and Richard immediately and indelibly became allies and co-conspirators. In a kind of preview of Irv's disruption of a 1990 speech by George H.W. Bush, when she held up a sign pointing out, "Talk is cheap, AIDS funding is not," and was immediately marched out of the auditorium by the Secret Service. Urvashi would raise her hand in their law school classes and inquire about the curriculum, but when do we get to the socialist readings? She and Richard went on to devise an independent study class on LGBTQ folk and the law, the first class of its kind in the country. Shortly after I met Irv, I attended a conference. I think it was supposed to be to decide the future of feminism. And his interesting new friend kept popping up in every workshop I attended. She would find a seat next to me and chat me up. And when the conference ended, she invited me to dinner at her group house in Alston. Nice of her, I thought, since it never occurred to me in those days that she or anyone might be flirting with me. When I arrived, Urvashi was rushing around the kitchen, a million pots going, delicious scents that were totally unfamiliar to me rising into the air. At one point, she produced a small ball of dough, flattened it into a disc, and fried it in a small, round-bottomed cast iron pan. At the right moment, she carefully pressed it around the edge with her fingers, and magically it puffed up like a balloon. Wow, I said, that's amazing. It's a puri, she said, an Indian bread. I make them all the time. Now, Urvashi's Indian dinners have since become famous. She was a fantastic cook. She loved inviting people over, introducing us to each other, getting us talking and laughing and debating politics. Afterwards, she would put on music. She was a great DJ, and we would dance in the living room, or sometimes in Provincetown in the street. Since that first night, I've eaten innumerable dinners at Urvashi's, but in all those years, I never again saw her take out the little cast iron pan and make a puri puff up like a balloon. Wooed with puris and Urvashi's irresistible attention, I fell in love. But our relationship was rocky. I was managing editor at Gay Community News, a position so intense and crisis-ridden that I could barely focus on anything else through my haze of constant panic and self-recrimination. Irv was in law school, or at least that's what she was doing when she wasn't organizing her roommates into study and action groups, joining the Pride Committee, interning at GCN and Glad Law, tagging the Copley Square Tea Station with queer graffiti, going to meetings of the Boston Lesbian and Gay Political Alliance, and getting high and going out to rock clubs. She and I did not believe in monogamy or jealousy, so she was busy with non-monogamy too, more so than I was, I think. When Irv lived in Boston, her group household was her base of operations. From there, one of the first projects was organizing Alston Brighton Greenlight. Greenlight projects were a thing at that time, created to defend women from street violence. Participating households would post a green light in the window to tell women who were being harassed or attacked that they could knock on the door and get help. Greenlight was a great project for Irv. It was local, but it dealt with a national, even international problem. Her group household joined and put a green light in their window, and they canvassed the neighborhood, recruiting others to post green lights to make the community safer. I don't know if the fleeing woman ever actually knocked on Urvashi's door, although you know if she had, Irv and her friends would have taken her in and done everything for her. But would-be harassers and batterers knew at the least that they were being watched. Violence against women could no longer be hidden in the home or ignored on the street. Another project of Irv's at the time was lesbian feminist liberation. She and her roommates and their friends and lovers met periodically to discuss books and plan actions. They made a banner, and it wasn't just some words scrawled on a flattened cardboard box from the food co-op. It was beautiful. Cloth, appliqué in bright colors, decorated with ribbons and beads and shells. It drew people to it whenever they marched with it. It's probably predictable that she and I broke up. One night we were having one of those awful conversations with long, painful pauses, and instead of finally kissing and having great makeup sex, I blurted out, "It's just not working." I was unhappy and dumb and preoccupied and not ready for her, and I was immediately, absolutely devastated at what I'd done. I thought I might just have made the stupidest decision of my life. I hadn't. We were not good as lovers, but we made it as friends. It wasn't easy. We had hurt each other. Urvashi would call me from her law job, and we would yell at each other and cry on the phone, and I would think they will never hire another lesbian again. But we lesbians hang on to our exes. It's what we're famous for. When love comes around, we don't let it go. And Urvashi's energy for relationship was boundless. I recently read an interview with this aging rock star, Nick Cave. not the artist Nick Cave, who is a totally different person and whose works you should immediately run out to see if you ever had a chance. Nick Cave, the rock star, said that when he was young, he believed that his art was the only important thing. Now he doesn't feel that way. He still makes music, he said, but, quote, it just feels self-evidently that other stuff needs your attention, like the people around you. Urvashi was not like Nick Cave. As relentlessly as she worked and as much passion as she poured into her work, her activism was not the only important thing. She never failed to tend to that other stuff, the people in her life, her queer family, her birth family, her person, the writer and comedian Kate Clinton. Everyone who encountered Urvashi experienced her generosity. With money, sure, she would buy you dinner, she would give you presents, she would support you in hard times. She and Kate donated extravagantly to all sorts of progressive organizations and candidates. But more important, maybe even more important to those people whom Irv supported in hard times, was her emotional generosity. She listened to you and then she told you what to do. Or sometimes she told you what to do and then listened to you. She was a great giver of advice, and she wasn't always wrong. She praised you at every opportunity, to your face, to anyone within earshot. She shared her opinions and ideas, and she wanted to hear yours even when you disagreed, or maybe especially then. She shared her feelings. She laughed out loud. She blew up at you and then let it bloat away. She always told you she loved you. Unlike Richard, who introduced me to Irv, I never worked with her. We shared a politics of an expansive, feminist, anti-racist, joyous, queer movement, but we didn't do our political work together. She was on the national stage while I was, well, here in Boston. Our relationship was simply personal. For more than 40 years, we were queer family for each other. After Irv died, a friend, someone I'd met through Urvashi, of course, she was always bringing people together, said to me, "This must be so hard for you since you were part of Urvashi's inner circle." And yes, she was right, it is hard. And then she said, but everyone was part of Urvashi's inner circle, that too. The Hebrew poet and World War II martyr Hannah Senesh wrote, "There are stars whose radiance is visible on earth, even though they themselves have disintegrated. And there are people whose memory continues to light the world after they had passed from it. These lights shine brightest in the darkest night. They light the path for us." Thank you. And I have some pre-order forms on the table if you feel like ordering the book. It's coming out in April.
Well, that was wonderful, Amy. Thank you. So there's absolutely no way that I can do justice to Ethan Gilsdorf in a 2-minute introduction. So I strongly encourage you to check out his website at ethangilsdorf.com. Before I get to Ethan's literary achievements, there are a few things he'd like you to know up front. 1, he likes to trespass in places where he should not be. Abandoned buildings, construction sites, and yes, college campuses. 2, his formative influences include filmmaker George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, Warner Brothers cartoon animator Chuck Jones, Mad Magazine, comedian George Carlin, and writer J.R.R. Tolkien, to name a few. 3, he has eaten a banana every day for the past 58 years, more or less. In his award-winning memoir, Fantasy Freaks and Gaming Geeks, it's on the table, Ethan goes on the road, not only in search of Dungeons and Dragons, but to get a better understanding of what it means to be a geek, as well as the importance of belonging to something. While reading his beautifully written book, I was continuously reminded of Meg Carney's opening remarks each residency. How on the first day, she assures all of us that we belong here, partly because we are hopelessly intelligent, AKA a little geeky. After reading Ethan's book, I felt that in some way, without him ever having been to Solstice, he hadn't been when he was writing that book, Ethan understood what our community is all about: belonging, accepting, seeking. And when I finally got to meet him at the residency, I quickly realized that Ethan in the Solstice MFA program is truly a match made in Middle Earth. Ethan Gilsdorf is a memoirist, an essayist, a critic, a journalist, poet, teacher, performer, dungeon master, and the author of the award-winning memoir, Fantasy Freaks and Gaming Geeks. Hundreds of his personal essays, articles, reviews, cultural commentaries, profiles, opinion pieces, short stories, and poems have appeared in the New York Times, Washington Post, Esquire, Boston Globe, Wired, Salon, National Geographic, and many more. Twice his work has been named notable by the Best American Essays. A former editor of Frank Magazine and New Delta Review, Ethan is the winner of the Hobblestock Peace Poetry Competition and the Esme Blackberry Contemporary Poets Prize. He has been featured on NPR, the Discovery Channel, PBS, CBS, BBC, and in the documentary Revenge of the Geeks. Ethan teaches creative writing at Grub Street in Boston, and thankfully for us, he is now a full-time faculty member of the Solstice MFA in Creative Writing program. Please give a warm Solstice welcome to our newest self-proclaimed fellow geek, Ethan Gilsdorf.
Little higher?
Yeah, got it.
How's that?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Cassie. That was lovely and unnecessary, but I appreciate it. I've only known you and known other members of the Solstice community for just under a few days, less than 2 weeks. And I already feel like as you said, I do feel like I belong here. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you, both Ellen and Cassie, for being the sort of people behind the scenes to keep things moving along here. Meg, Q, and all of the members of the community who I've been able to meet so far. Everyone's been so welcoming. It's been so fun to talk to people. And I've discovered that there are some serious nerds and geeks here already. I've had some wonderful conversations about how vampires are killed and, differing game systems for those people interested in role-playing games. So all of which is to say, I've chosen some readings that I think will perhaps some of the nerdly inclined will perhaps appreciate. So we'll start with actually, I am technically both a poet and a creative nonfiction writer and memoir writer. And I was trying to find a good poem to read to you that would sort of introduce me to the community. And this is one of those poems that is either a poem or it's a piece of stand-up comedy. I'm not sure which it is, but we'll see how it works here. It's called Headlines from Childhood. Drinking, smoking mom gives birth to normal boy. Clueless toddler makes hide the salami joke. Lammy found under snowbank in May, the shocking details. Neighborhood boys crucify sister to pine tree. Living room study, dog farts cause drowsiness. How to eat zucchini, glass of milk secret revealed. Walk to corner store, not exactly miles. After divorce, sad family eats omelets, yogurt shakes for dinner. Recovering mom tosses buttered roll. Julia Child ignores squabble in New Hampshire house. Boy catches falling television, Wheel of Fortune saved.
Area teen speechless after fourth orgasm. Mr. Bonacorsi, does he really hump lab station? Government report 1,023 PB&Js eaten since 8th grade. In historic agreement, woman lets ex inside house. Left on red, Dunes driving test. Gymnastics, jazz dance, still considered gay. Beer, Playboy gift from aunt. Sending wrong message. D&D AV club. Chick magnets. College-bound senior, still technically virgin. And High School Musical proves even geeks can sing. Thank you. So you're in for a treat because I don't know how this is going to work. I have never read any of this material that I'll be reading you tonight in public before. It's just really just been shared between me and my computer and my imaginary friends. I'm working on another memoir. So as Cassie mentioned, I think really accurately and kindly, this book, Fantasy Freaks and Gaming Geeks, sort of chronicles my own interest in fantasy and role playing, and really begins in a place where I talk about or dramatize the moment when I first discovered Dungeons and Dragons. And it coincides with a particular moment in my life, which was that my mother, who was 38 years old when I was 11, suffered an unexpected and terribly tragic traumatic brain injury, spent a good portion of 1978 and 1979 at Mass General Hospital, and emerged from that experience disabled in so many ways, and was devastating for her, number one, and was very devastating for myself and my siblings and my mother's whole circle of friends and family. So the book, my first book, Fantasy Freaks, sort of starts with that as sort of the inciting incident, but then very quickly flashes forward to Ethan as an adult, rediscovering his D&D stuff literally in the basement, which is where I'd left it apparently 30 years before, and goes off on a quest to sort of reconnect with his nerdy past. So I kind of leave behind the story of me at the time. That's only sort of a footnote in some ways in this book. So I'm really trying now to write the story in memoir form of what it would like to really be that kid who was Ethan as an 11, 12-year-old kid in the middle school, and high school. And like David was saying, like Amy was saying, or David, you were saying about Amy's work in terms of using fictional techniques or writing fiction based on personal experience. I feel like I'm writing memoir in this draft that is currently kind of a hot mess, but anyway, that sort of draws upon fictional techniques. So the memoir is called tentatively The Momster Manual, a memoir adventure. And the Momster is the unfortunate nickname that we gave our mother because she was part mom, part monster. And so the memoir experiments with me trying to recreate that time in my life, but I also play around with some of my favorite nerdy tropes and draw in references to Dungeons and Dragons and some of my favorite pop cultural sort of milestone things in my life, all of my interest in science fiction and fantasy. So the memoir sort of has, at the moment, has sort of these short vignettes, which kind of go back and forth between a narrative part and sort of these interludes, which are semi-fictional, fantastical takeoffs, which I think you'll figure out once I get there. So I'm going to start with a section here called Another Visit. Do you want to see your mother? One of my mom's female friends asks. Sure, I probably say, but honestly, I'm sure I don't want to see her. Who would? I'm with Adam and Jess and the friend, perhaps Sue or Alice, or perhaps a nurse who leads us down a different corridor and through a different door. Mom has been moved from the ICU to another part of the hospital. This room is less dim, but the window shades are still pulled down. Fewer machines are making fewer noises, and fewer of them seem to be connected to Mom. Silence, except faint sounds of cars outside, the trains coming and going at the Charles MGH station. The curtain is pulled back by an unseen hand, and there she is, sitting up in bed, eating dinner. A nurse gestures to me. You can go closer. In the bed, she is small, childlike, like a wounded bird she once tried to nurse back to health in our kitchen. Her head is wrapped in bandages and her face is swollen like a tomato that's about to burst. Mom smiles as she sees us. Her face is less puffy now, and the bandages have been partly removed. A swollen mark stretches across her skull, but someone on staff has made an effort to hide the gash, brushing her straight black hair across the stitches. I catch a glimpse of it, the dark mark like a zipper or tire tracks. I look away. Mom doesn't say anything. She's focused on eating her dessert, a cup of coffee ice cream. Her brow is furrowed as she takes a spoonful and aims it at her mouth, but then changes course and drops it in her coffee. Sarah, maybe, a nurse begins. I do this, Mom croaks. She speaks. Mom is determined to put her entire serving of coffee ice cream into her cup of coffee. She's never done this before. Her favorite flavor was always black raspberry. Perhaps the coffee is too hot and she's trying to cool it down. Perhaps the ice cream is too cold and she's trying to melt it or heat it up. Or something about the coffee-flavored ice cream and the hot coffee in her cup is confusing to her. How can two different kinds of coffee exist at the same time? And she wants to combine the two, fuse them into a single coffee experience. She directs her right arm like a slow-moving backhoe, jabs it into the ice cream, and moves another spoonful to her coffee, and moves another spoonful to her coffee, but it slips off and lands on the orange plastic tray. At the moment I finally see it, her left arm, which automatically ripples at the shoulder, and her hand, which flutters at the wrist in an attempt to react in time. But the hand can't move more than a few inches, and I see her left hand locked, stiff in a permanent curl, as if grasping an imaginary pack of cigarettes. Here, let me help, Mom, Adam says. He approaches her closer than any of us has dared before. He sits on the edge of the bed. He is 13, nearing 14, almost 2 years older than I am. He is brave. Mom smiles a lopsided smile and nods in an exaggerated way. Okay. Adam manages to help her with this absurd task, turning her hot coffee into a warm milkshake. Mom seems pleased and smiles, maybe even laughs. After that, we sit and stand in silence as Mom ignores the coffee soup and stares off into the distance. Maybe she's wondering where she is or what's happened to her. An adult stands in the corner of the hospital room, gazing at her, looking concerned, gazing at us, perhaps assessing how we are responding. Are we okay? It's hard to explain the absence of something like a mother when I'm so young that I can't even articulate the idea of a mother. It is as if you woke up one day and your house was suddenly gone. All of its things, pictures and furniture and games and closets, all of your possessions gone. No disaster, no fire, no flood, no cellar hole or boarded up construction site to trespass and explore. No ruins to pick through, no story. Simply the blunt fact that the house is gone. The home base, the root, the nest, simply vanished. What if the hospital room was a clearing in the woods behind our house, a mossy oasis sitting in a sentinel ring of pines, a carpet of decaying pine needles muffling the sound, lichens covering the trees, especially the dying ones, always on the north side. I want to hear the sound of rushing water, the little river just down the road, through the woods, through the sand pit, whose banks and pools and falls I've studied and fished in many expeditions, which flows into the Lamprey River, whose rapids I've run in inner tubes and whose mucky brown waters I've cooled myself, which flows into Little Bay and then into Great Bay and then into the ocean and eventually Boston Harbor. This forest nook protects me. I want it to protect my mother. Okay, I think it's time to go, a nurse says. I'm led out of the room. I catch a final glance at Mom, who seems tiny in the bed, a raft drifting on the river. It would be easy to say that you just carry on, but you don't even know what that means. You simply live in that vacant space and try to understand its shape, its contours, its dimensions, how to feel for them, how to touch them, how to even measure them. Soon it's time to go. Give your mother a rest, the nurse says again. Mom has fallen asleep again. The orange tray is removed. The curtain is drawn. We are led out of the room. 45 years later, I'm still learning to feel, to touch, to measure. So the memoir has these sort of interstitial interruptions where I'm playing around with some different forms. And if you're not familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, it involves, you can't see this, I wish I brought my large 20-sided die. A 20-sided die, which, zoom in on, I hope you can at home. It's a 20-sided die, one of the sort of quintessential dice that you roll in the game to determine the fates of your characters in the storyline. And because Dungeons and Dragons is full of rules and all kinds of amazing sort of, backstories, there's tons and tons of charts and tables that you can consult to sort of give you ideas about where the story will take you next. And typically you'll have a situation where you roll a die, and based on the die roll, you'll consult a chart and you'll look at that number and it will determine the effect of something. So this is a table that I've devised that would occur maybe after this section or after a different section. Table of random puzzles and traps set by disabled broken mother to thwart her son on his quest to defeat or love her. And it starts at the top with the dice roll, and then the effect, the trap that you get. If you roll a 1 or a 2, the room of shifting memories. You enter a chamber where images of your happiest childhood moments are projected on the walls. To move forward, you must identify which memories are real and which are fabrications. Reliving them fills you with crushing regret. Make a difficulty class 18 wisdom check to avoid temporary paralysis. 3-4, the locked door of burden. A massive iron door blocks your path with a riddle carved in its surface. The answer is something your mother always wanted to hear, but you were afraid to say. 5 or 6, the suffocating embrace. Ghostly tendrils resembling her arms reach out from the shadows, wrapping around you in a crushing grip. To escape, you must either break free physically, difficulty class 15 strength check, or whisper words of forgiveness to the specter. 7 through 15, the timekeeper's puzzle. An enchanted clock ticks incessantly with its hand turning backwards. You must solve the puzzle of how to make it move forward, but every wrong answer rewinds time, forcing you to relive a painful conversation with your mother. 16 to 18, the weight of regret. You find a golden scale, and the only way to proceed is to balance it by placing objects symbolizing your past regrets on one side. Each object saps 1 hit point when placed. 17, 18, the mask of her image. A mask resembling her face lies on a pedestal. If you put it on, you gain insight into her thoughts and feelings, but you suffer psychic damage. 2 to 8 points of damage as her pain becomes your own. 20, the final echo. A room filled with echoes and cries, a room filled with echoes of cries for help. The sounds overwhelm your senses, requiring a difficulty class 18 constitution saving throw to proceed. If you succeed, you can leave the room, but failure turns the echoes into accusations and you are trapped here for eternity. Okay, the last piece I'm going to read to you is a little bit longer, and this is one of the sort of fantastical events. As you probably gathered, I'm a huge Tolkien fan, a huge Star Wars fan, and so I've devised these different moments in the narrative where I sort of reenact some favorite moments from some of these books, stories, video games, things that I've been absorbed into my DNA at this point, and sort of replay them as narratives relating to the situation that the Ethan character is involved in. And so these are all second person sections where it's referred to, and some of them are sort of in the form of a choose your own adventure. Like you walk into the kitchen, you see the monster, you can choose, if you choose, to go to the right, this path happens. If you choose to go to the left, this happens. This is a bit more straightforward. You'll figure out what it is. Super Star Wars nerds will immediately see how I've reappropriated some key lines from a certain franchise. It's called Cantina. In this adventure, you are marooned on Tatooine. The wind whips hot across the sand and rock. Ripples of heat rise from the hood of your land speeder you have borrowed. You arrive at the Mos Eisley checkpoint. Let me see your identification, says the stormtrooper, trying to sound tough. But it's hard to sound tough with a voice modulated by a radio. It's hard to look tough beneath all that white armor. The soldier probably isn't much older than you are. You want Obi-Wan Ben Kenobi to say, you don't need to see his identification, and for the stormtrooper to say, we don't need to see his identification, and then for Ben Kenobi to say, these aren't the droids we're looking for, and for the trooper to agree and say, these aren't the droids we're looking for, and for Ben to be like, hey, he can go about his business, and the stormtrooper to be like, you can go about your business, and then Ben says, move along, and the stormtrooper says, move along, move along. But the truth is, you don't have an Obi-Wan Ben Kenobi with you. or any other mentor or bearded sage or wise stranger to accompany you. You don't have that father figure along for the ride to smooth things over, to astound and protect you with his Jedi mind tricks and crazy old wizard hocus pocus and mystical energy field that controls your destiny. You do have an ID, however. You just got your driver's license, so you show that to the stormtrooper, who oddly doesn't seem to care. Move along. Since he was so nice, you dare to ask for advice. Say, do you know where a guy might grab a drink around here? Yeah, up ahead at the cantina, take a left, then a right. You can't miss it. Thanks. Have a nice day. The stormtrooper waves, then goes back to chatting with his buddy. You too. Not all guys working for the Empire are so bad, right? You follow the directions, slowing the speeder down to a crawl. You pass a few folk hustling past with important bundles under their arms and a couple droids whirring by. You see a few odd-looking creatures loitering by a doorway. They wear masks and goggles and oversized ears or elephant trunks. The usual scum and villainy. This must be the place. You are on this mission alone. It's a solo mission to find transport to the other planets in the Outer Rim. Somewhere in the Outer Rim is where you last heard from her, where you last lost contact with her, your mother. You park the speeder in the street and duck into the bar. The ceiling is low and cave-like. Horn music blares from the back. You've heard of the band before. Figure and Dan and the modal nodes, a bunch of Biffs who always seem to have gigs in these places. The place is crowded. Humanoids of various shapes and sizes sitting at booths and tables standing around, belly up to the bar. You walk over to the bartender. Excuse me, I'm looking for a pilot, someone I can hire. Know anyone? The bartender points to a table in a shadowy corner there. You slowly make your way to the corner. A man slumps at the table, all cowboy-like, some sort of blaster at his side. His partner is a massive ape-like thing, part Sasquatch, part carpet. A slender snouted, pointy-eared reptile humanoid lays prone on the floor in a swatch of blood and blast marks. One of the barkeep's minions is cleaning up, dragging away the body. The cowboy dude looks up. Can I help you? He seems annoyed. You weren't expecting him to speak. He catches you off guard. I don't got all day, kid. Speak up or get out of the way. You're blocking my view. Sorry, sir. I'm hoping to hire. I need a ship, a pilot, and a ship. He perks up, as does his hairy friend, and they exchange some sort of look. You got my attention. He points to a seat next to me. Take a load off. You sit down. Where are you headed? Somewhere in the Outer Rim. I'm looking for someone, a woman. You don't tell him who. Help me out, kid. The galaxy is a big place. Can you be more specific? Where'd you last see her? You're not sure what to say. How do you tell this bandit and scoundrel I'm looking for my mother, that she's somewhere out there, not on Tatooine, but some other far-flung world, that she's lost or captured or left me? All three. That's the thing, you mutter. I don't exactly know. Maybe some civilized place like Wayland, where the Pazdans and Manirshi are, or maybe somewhere more remote, hard to get to, like Locke. The hairy ape chuffs and huffs and makes some sort of Bigfoot laugh sound. Chewie thinks that's funny. Locke? In the Carthax system? Lava, sulfur pools, red deserts. Sounds lovely while you're there. Maybe we'll hang out with the scumbags of Nim's criminal empire, too. Oh. Hey, why not kill yourself and stop by Dathomir on the Quelly system? Sure, it looks pretty with nice forests and swamps and mountains, but the place is teeming with rancor. You'll never get out alive. He tips back a mug of some liquid and folds his arm behind his head. The hairy beast chuckles again. I see. You're such an idiot. Do you know anything about the Outer Rim, he says? Do you know what you're doing? I guess not. This guy thinks you're a total loser. Sorry, I don't want to bother you anymore, mister. I didn't get your name. Solo, Han Solo. A man reaches out and shakes your hand. He leans back and lets out a sigh. Listen, kid, can you tell me what you're looking for? You gulp. It's my mom. You and Solo exchange a moment, a meaningful look. I see. What does she look like? Great question, you think to yourself. It's been so many years I don't really know anymore. She sort of looks like me from the nose up, black hair, but smaller, and maybe like 26 years older than I am. Here, you reach into your pack and you pull out a piece of paper, fold it over into a square. You've kept this square for eons. You hand it over, this photo of your mother. He unfolds it. Nice looking lady, not much to go on, but if I ever see her, I'll let her know. I'll send it out on some smuggler's frequency. All kinds of travelers tune into that channel. Maybe someone might have seen her. Maybe you'll get lucky. I think she's changed a lot since then. I haven't really seen her really since I was 12. I hear you, kid. My old lady and I haven't spoken in a Kratz Dragon's age. I don't think I'd recognize her either, if she's even alive. Right. You gulp. You get your things together and stand up to go, well, thanks, Sir Solo. He stops you. I feel bad for you, kid. I can tell you're in trouble. He mutters something to Chewie. You guess his name is, and Chewie growls back, nodding and shrugging. He sighs. Look, we're headed galactic west in a couple of days to intercept a ship near Bakura. We'll be on the fringes, swinging by Smuggler's Den and Spice Terminus Death Star. We could drop you off near any of those places. We're trying to avoid Imperial entanglements, if you know what I mean. That's why we're leaving so soon and going rimward. How long will it take? Do you have a fast ship? Fast ship? You've never heard of the Millennium Falcon? Should I have? It's the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. I've outrun Imperial starships, not the local bulk cruisers, mind you. I'm talking about the big Carillion ships now. She's fast enough for you, kid. Of course he has a fast ship. You think to yourself, duh, you're such a loser. That would be terrific. Terrific? Did you just say terrific to a space pirate? You gather your wits. Thank you. Listen, we didn't talk about the ticket. How much does this cost? I got like 1,000. I can also pay you in Imperial credits if you prefer. That's about, yeah, I know the exchange rate, kid. I'll take either, but let's not worry about it now. You go home and I'll see you tomorrow. Docking Bay 94. We leave at midnight. Thanks, Sir Solo. Sir is my father's name, kid. Han. You can call me Han. You swear he winks at you. Chewie slaps you on the back and nearly knocks you over. Thanks. See ya, kid. As you cross the cantina, wending through the crowd of drunk and smelly creatures, you swear you hear Han behind you. Nice kid. Too bad I'll never find her. Thank you.
All right. So, wow. Can we have one more round of applause for Amy and Ethan?